Yeah, so YouGov has spoken to over 3,500 Scottish adults since the 10th of April up until the 21st of May. So all the field work is post Youssef taken over and post the arrests of former sort of major SNP grandees hitting the news. And what we found is some quite strong results for the Labour Party. As we somewhat expected, the figures at the minute suggest that if a general election were being held tomorrow, and of course it was being held on current boundaries as it would be if it were being held tomorrow, that Labour would be up 23 seats in Scotland, making 23 gains from the SNP, taking their tally up to 24. The SNP would fall back to their worst results since that big breakthrough election, that yellow tide in 2015, and they'd be down to 27 seats. The Conservatives back on 4 and the Liberal Democrats on 4 as well. So very, very encouraging news for Anasawa, for Keir Starmer, as they try to rebuild their Scottish seats, their Scottish heartlands, and of course, this could be very important when we're thinking ahead to a potential parliamentary majority for Keir Starmer. If it gets over to Scotland, could be a crucial component in that. And this poll would suggest that he's on track to do very well there, perhaps help him into number 10 with a parliamentary majority.
Yes, and it doesn't matter that for Labour why this is happening. But were you able to? I don't know what questions you asked, but do you know whether this is happening because people are fed up of or disillusioned with the SNP, or think that the Labour offering is suddenly better?
So with an MRP poll, we simply asked people how they would vote if a general election were happening tomorrow. So don't follow that up with any other questions. However, what we can say are two very important things. One is that before Sturgeon left, the SNP had been on a bit of a decline in terms of their ratings, in terms of their polling numbers, and Labour had been recovering. If we cast our minds back to the local elections in Scotland, Labour did quite well there as well, supplanted the Conservatives in second place and started eating into a lot of these same areas. We're now seeing Labour do well in this MRP poll. So I think there are some long-term things here. Could be incumbency, could be to do with frustrations around some of the areas that the Scottish Government policy has been struggling with, perhaps education. Also, I do think, of course, the big news stories around Nicola Sturgeon's husband and around the sort of the mismanagement of party finances have taken their toll indeed. Negative news stories are never good news for parties and politicians, even for those perhaps not central to it, like Youssef at the moment, as far as we know. So that certainly has taken its toll on the party's ratings and support, we think.
Now, this obviously doesn't look good for the SNP, and it's not difficult to predict perhaps that this would happen in polling. This would be reflected in polling. Are we in danger of forgetting, though, that the SNP were operating, maybe not in very recent years, but over the last decade or so, operating from hugely high position, domination of Scottish politics, and very high ratings. So if they come down a bit, it looks disastrous, but actually they're coming down from a very, very, very high position.
I think so. Extraordinarily high position. Of course, they won that parliamentary majority in the Scottish Parliament, and the electoral system was designed for them not to be able to do that. So certainly they're coming from a position of huge strength, and we should never really realistically expect that to maintain forever. And if this is the SNP's low ebb, let's say, well, I think the party might look at that and say, if we don't go below 27 seats in Scotland, perhaps that's not too much of a trough after all. But look, I think perhaps the wider picture is definitely worth considering for.
Yes, we are just losing Patrick there, but I think we got the gist of what he was saying. That's Patrick English from YouGov.